is wonderful. It is.
Mr. Chairman, you are live on YouTube.
Thank you. So this ag meeting will come to order. It is March 18th. And I guess let's go with roll call.
Okay. Representative Blackburn,
Here.
Vice Chair Clausen,
Here.
Representative Fortner,
Excuse, he's presenting a bill.
Representative Heiner,
Here.
Representative Larson,
Here.
Representative Western,
Here.
Representative Worf,
Here.
Representative Winter,
Here.
Chairman Eklund.
Here,
8 present, 1 excused.
thank you. So what we have is a continuation of Senate File 25. It's the animal impound proceedings. And we'll try as much as we can to not plow old ground. Director True is available for questions. I don't know if he wanted to testify concerning the bill again. We know of an amendment or two that we're going to be bringing, fairly small changes. And with that, if it's okay with the committee, I would like Representative Crago to come forward and explain how the bill meshes with the other animal abuse bill that we passed a week or two ago. Welcome to our committee, Representative.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So previously, we had passed Senate File 26, which was a rework of all of the animal abuse statutes, both on the livestock side as well as on the, what I'm going to say, the pet side, dogs, cats, household animals. And really, we didn't change much. We reorganized it to allow it to make more sense, allow prosecutors, law enforcement to have a better idea of exactly what they were doing.
So I'm going to interrupt a bit so the public knows it was House Bill. You had said Senate file, and I think it was House Bill 26.
Senate
It is?
file.
And it came to us.
Yeah, you got it right away.
Oh, I see. Okay. All right. I stand corrected. Go ahead. I'm sorry for the interruption.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So anyways, Senate File 25, which is before you today, is really a sister bill to that bill, and they were divided out. Not exactly sure why, wasn't part of that process, but it divides out the impoundment procedures from the actual abuse, the reorganization of the abuse statutes. The impoundment procedures in Senate File 25, which is before you today, these are new statutes, or will be new statutes, assuming it makes it through the House. And really what it does is it provides protections and procedures for the impoundment procedures that were sort of ad hoc in the past. Under the bill, they would become defined and set forth clearly in statute so that law enforcement officials and the public knows what the procedure is and how to go about it. And on top of that, it really provides protections for the owners of the animals that did not exist before. And the main one is there's an opportunity for a hearing, which we did not have before under the old statutes. And I think Director True testified about this last time we were here. Typically, there would not be a hearing on, for instance, livestock, because by the time they were able to get a hearing, the animals were likely already sold or disposed of. And this allows the owner of the livestock their day in court before their animals can be disposed of. So long, two conditions have to be met. One, either they pay the bond requirement, or it's an animal that provides a living, or it's their occupation, so to speak. of the person whose animals were seized. So that would apply to livestock directly. So if someone comes to the ranch and impounds your livestock, you're entitled to a hearing. Or if they impound your pet and you pay the bond amount for the bond period, you're entitled to a hearing. If you don't, if those two conditions aren't met, the animals can be disposed of under the new bill without a hearing. And that's, straightforward, simple, provides a lot of protection that did not exist before. And I think in order to protect our ranchers, livestock owners in the state, it's a good bill to do that. It also provides protection to pet owners as well. But me, coming from my ag background, I think it's important that we do it on behalf of the ranchers, agriculturalists, so to speak.
Okay. Committee questions? All right, so under this, it limits down the amount of time that this whole thing can go on. Well, maybe I start from the beginning. The impoundment and the need to pay a bond the owners will be notified of this, which didn't always happen, is my understanding. Correct?
That's correct, Mr. Chairman.
And then the amount of time for a hearing, I think in the livestock, it was 14 days, or did it get amended to 7? I'm trying to remember the difference between the original bill and that.
The time period is 7 days.
Okay,
So there's 2 time periods. One, you have 10 days to pay the bond amount.
okay,
And then once a decision has been made to forfeit the animal, if law enforcement or the people holding the animal decide they want to have a forfeiture hearing, they have to have a hearing within 7 days once that notice has been given.
okay. So under this bill, they'll have their day in court.
That's correct. I mean, that's really the meat of the bill.
All right. Any questions then? Okay. Thank you, Representative Crago. I don't see your hand up, Director True. If you do want into the meeting to make any comments, this would be probably a good time to do that.
Mr. Chairman, Director True has not joined us yet.
Okay,
But you do have Sue Castaneda.
okay, let's, yeah. All right. Mrs. Castaneda, did you want to testify?
She has her hand raised, so I'm bringing her in
Okay.
for you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, good morning. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have with me today, I thought, ACO, or Animal Control Officer Ryan Johnson, who I think there was some questions more about how we do what we do as far as animals and impoundment proceedings now. So I thought I would make him available to answer any questions. I guess the one thing I want to make clear on our feeling about this bill is it's not for us to, when we pick up just any dog or any cat that's being impounded, but basically really just to address those animals that we have to hold because of our animal control contracts with the city and county until court cases can be adjudicated. So with that, does anyone have any questions for Officer Johnson?
Committee, questions? Okay, I would have one. So under the pet side of this bill, this will make the statutes more clear as to what the procedure would be. Am I correct on that?
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. And it also limits down the time with pets to where the owner would be notified and would have their day in court. It'd be set at a fairly early date. I'm not sure whether mixed up on the week or 10 days, similar to the livestock one. I guess you could, that way you're not holding animals for 200 days, 300 days and running up tens of thousands of dollars worth of.
That's exactly right, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. We have a question from Representative Winter, go ahead, John.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is for the officer there. Do you folks do any investigation prior to impounding an animal, picking it up or whatever? Do you try to find the owner and before you do anything like that?
Yes, Mr. Winter. The criteria that has to be met for us before we impound an animal is that there has to be probable cause that an animal cruelty act, whether it be a neglect act or an abuse act, has to be the burden that we use is probable cause. And as long as that criteria is met, the officer at his discretion can impound the animal. You know, it's kind of a case by case scenario for us on what we choose to impound, you know, in advocacy for the animals, you know, and everybody involved in the matter. We want to make sure that when we impound an animal, the reason for that is we're not trying to put the animal back into a dangerous situation in which the impound was merited in the first place. You know, occasionally if it's a dog, we'll just say that was left in a vehicle in the Walmart parking lot unattended and is suffering from some sort of heat distress. You know, that can be seen as a situational type scenario where we'll go get the dog evaluated and actually return it back to the owner at that time. So in a case like that, I don't think, you know, this bill would really have too much of an effect on a case like that. But if, you know, this is somebody actually physically abusing a dog, hitting it, striking it, something to that effect, we want to remove that animal from the current situation, impound it at the shelter, and then this bill would take effect.
Okay. Representative Winter, follow up.
Yes, thank you. I just worry about busybodies trying to be in control of things when they should be trying to find out who the owner is and so forth. I just don't, there's so many folks that have thoughts of interfering in other people's lives. And so I just want to limit that as much as possible.
Okay.
Yes, Mr. Winter, I understand. You know, this is typically an animal cruelty case, you know, whether a dog's left out in a Wyoming snowstorm or what have you. You know, we will know who the owner is typically during the impoundment, whether we get the owner's info from the address where the dog is being seized from, or, you know, the dog's identification. We typically will let the owner know immediately upon impoundment of that dog or cat.
Okay. Representative Heiner.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is a philosophical question. In this bill, it says that no animal will be disposed of prior to having a hearing if the animal is connected to the livelihood or ability to make a living of the owner. How would you determine that? Because, you know, there's some dogs that are utilized for. Is that just the livestock portion? I thought it was for any animal that might be used for livelihood. But I just curious, how do you determine if that's for the livelihood? Because some pets are used in for the livelihood of their owners.
Sure, I guess I haven't really thought that part through. I was under the impression that part was specifically for livestock, but I could be wrong on that.
Yeah, we have that meshed into this bill.
Okay.
So I'm not just sure where it is.
Yeah, it's on page 9, but I was under the assumption that it
That's livestock.
extended beyond livestock for any animal that may be connected to livelihood or employment for the owner.
Mr. Chairman, I guess this is Sue. I would say that, you know, none of these animals are going to be disposed of without proper court proceedings. You know, if there was a breeder, for example, I mean, the woman that I mentioned last week, I think with the 21 Springer Spaniels, she may have at the time said she was breeding dogs to sell, but when there were 21 of them stuffed in the back of the car and covered in urine and feces, we certainly still had to go to court over that as well. Thank you.
Okay. Mitty, are you Are you satisfied? All right. Thank you, both of you, for coming to our committee and testifying.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, committee, what's your pleasure?
I think you have one more person on.
Do we have someone else on?
Mr. Chairman, you have Mr. Illaway.
Okay,
He hasn't raised his hand, though.
Pete, did you want to talk? If you do, welcome to our committee. I think we'll go ahead and start working the bill. If Mr. Illaway comes on, we'll bring him in later. This virtual format is.
He's got his hand up now.
Now he's got his hand up. We'll wait. We have a question?
Yes, Mr.
Representative
Chairman,
Worf.
I do have one question, and it kind of, I think, ties into what Representative Heiner was asking. What about emotional support animals? I mean, do we deal with those animals differently? I mean, I just know there's a lot of people anymore that have different designations, different classifications. But I don't know where we address emotional support animals in this bill.
I think it's addressed as they are pets, then they fit into the pet category. I believe I'd be correct on that. The same procedure would have to apply to them as it would in an abuse case where you had somebody hoarding dogs, or the normal problems that we have with pet owners, I guess. So are you on yet, Pete?
Mr. Chairman, I'll bring him over.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay. Good morning.
Good morning, Mr. Illaway. Go ahead when you're ready.
Mr. Chair, can you hear me?
Yes, we
Morning.
can. We can't see you, but we can hear you.
All right, thank you. Good morning, committee, Mr. Chairman. Been a little tough getting in with the snow and so forth. But anyhow, I just wanted to make sure that Ms. Castaneda got a chance to testify. I know you were a little late coming on. I know that Representative Winter was interested last time we met regarding a veterinarian for livestock. And I think that was a proposed amendment to put that section back in. And it seemed to me it was on page 7, somewhere around line 12 on that, to put a veterinarian, to make sure that a veterinarian was always present for livestock. And I think the only other thing that we might have forgotten about last week, that when the animals are picked up for the animal shelter and taken to the animal shelter, I know we've been called numerous times if our animals got loose. Nothing happens to that animal until they have tried every which way to contact the owner, whether it's through a chip, whether it's through a dog tag or whatever. And we've paid mightily sometimes for the dog being impounded. So at least this animal shelter, I know, is very, very concerned with making sure that those animals get back to the owner. And then, of course, with due process, 7 to 10 days. It seems to me it's 7 days now that the court will try to hear the case and set the bond. So it's a good bill. Representative Crago did a great job in talking about it. He's county attorney in Buffalo. I think he's done a great job in working with this bill. So I'd really urge you to go ahead and move the bill out onto the floor. I think you'll find that it is really a good bill. You had a veterinarian last week, Speaker Barlow came down, talked about the bill. The bill's a good bill. It's been well vetted through the year. So would appreciate any help you can give us. Thank you.
Committee questions for Mr. Ellaway? Thank you, Pete.
You bet.
And Mrs. Castaneda and one of her animal control officers were here this morning and testified on Zoom. So we got their input.
Great.
Okay. Now, do we have any further testimony that you know of, Carla? Either?
No, Mr. Chairman, I do not see anyone else at this time.
Okay. All right, committee, what's your pleasure? Okay, moved by Blackburn, seconded by Western. Yep. All right, discussion on the bill. Yes, sir.
I've got a couple of amendments I think we need.
Representative Clausen.
All right, page 7, line 14, or lines 13, 14, 15. Remove the stricken language. So we'll put the as determined by a Wyoming licensed veterinarian or a veterinarian employed by the board.
Okay. That's been moved to amend the language back into the bill, lines 13, what's been stricken, 13 through 15. It's been seconded by someone, Blackburn. Any discussion on that amendment? So it was part of our discussion last week that this is standard procedure anyway, but we'll keep it in the bill because make it clear that the veterinarians need to be involved with any of these kind of cases. Question being called. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. And then there's one more standing committee amendment.
Mr. Chairman.
Go ahead.
Page 12, line 3. At the end of line 3, change the may to a shall.
Okay. So that has been moved as a committee of the whole second amendment. Yes. Do we have a second on that? All right, seconded by somebody, Western, thank you. So it's my understanding by putting the shall in, it will mirror what the pet side of the bill says. So there's always a bit of discussion as to whether we should have may or shall. In the case of these animal statutes, I think it's appropriate to have shall so that there's no question as to what the obligations are for the parties involved in it. Any discussion on that amendment? Question being called. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, that amendment passes. You have that, Carol and Carla? Carol? Okay. Yes, Representative Winter.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think that another thing we need to add here right after, well, it'd be on page 7, line 15, right after board that's going to be reinstated. We need to include the Wyoming brand inspector there.
Okay. Yeah, go ahead, Representative Clausen.
I think the board would be the state livestock board, which could be the brand inspector. But this is a veterinarian employed by the board, so I think I don't see a problem if you want to add a brand inspector too, but a veterinarian employed by the livestock board is kind of what's implied there with the board.
The other thing, so some of the research that a couple of us did on persons of authority, the brand inspectors fit in that category. So this would kind of be redundant. I don't have a problem with putting it in if you're more comfortable having it there. You are.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I think it's really important that we identify the brand inspector. I've seen too many situations where the brand inspector was not contacted and problems resulted from that. So
All right. Would you be okay if we inserted it with the part on persons of authority? And I'm trying to find that part of this. It's there? Oh, it is there. Okay. So do you, we've stricken part of it.
Do we have a second on that, Mr. Chairman?
I don't know. I'll second it. I want to discuss this. I think that it's not going to harm the bill at all to have that in there. And I think that it will calm some of the concerns that livestock people will have. Years and years of doing this, you get to where you really respect your, the brand inspectors have more respect than most people I know in the community. So I'm trying to figure out how we want to put it in. Yes, Representative Clausen.
Just a suggestion. Okay, Wyoming livestock veterinarian or veterinarian employed by the board, comma, or Wyoming brand inspector. Does that make sense? A Wyoming brand inspector.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, we might have a suggestion from somebody who is a little better wordsmith.
Yeah. Yeah, we have somebody who's used to reading statute law. So Mr. Craig will come on, Representative Craig will come on back up. Tell us how you want to insert that.
Thank you,
What you
Mr.
think?
Chairman. I don't have a suggestion. All I was going to point out is I don't think putting brand inspector where Representative Winter wants to put it right there will accomplish what he's trying to accomplish.
Okay.
Because what that sentence says is that the vet has to determine whether the animal is being treated with cruelty. The brand inspector is not going to want to make that determination. If we want to put a separate provision in there that an animal can't be impounded without first alerting the brand inspector, I think that's fine. But I don't think I guess what I would say is I don't think it fits right in that particular provision. I think what Representative, and he can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think what Representative Winter is trying to get at is the brand inspector should be part of the process. If we're going to impound livestock, we at least need to alert the brand inspector.
Okay, would it be appropriate to take it up to the top of this paragraph, or do you think it should be inserted somewhere besides this paragraph? We had any peace officer, some stricken language. So I'm on page 7, line 9. Any peace officer, agent, or officer of the board, that has been stricken. And then it says person with authority to enforce this chapter of the Wyoming statute who has probable cause. How would it work to just go ahead and insert in this stricken, take away the stricken language and add brand inspectors there? Work fine or not?
I don't think so,
Okay.
Mr. Chairman. So what I would do, I would just add another sentence at the end of that paragraph that's something
Okay.
along this line that says, if an animal is impounded under this subsection, the local brand inspector must be given notice. Or
Thank you.
provided notice or language, something to that effect. I think that would solve the problem. At least the local brand inspector would know that the animal had been impounded or would be part of the process at that point. And then they could possibly help track down the owner if they didn't know who the owner was. And if it's an animal that we talked about this last week, if you find an animal, stray animal or whatnot, and it gets impounded, the brand inspector may be able to help track down the owner. They'd be the one best suited to do that.
Okay. So are you good with that, Representative Winter?
Mr. Chairman, no.
Okay.
I'm
go
not.
ahead.
I think that we need to, I'm not real confident in some veterinarians and as far as livestock are concerned. And so I think that the brand inspector needs to be involved in order to make good judgments whether a livestock are being cared for or not. I don't believe that there's several or different peace officers don't have the experience and some veterinarians don't have, I don't believe. So we need to involve him to the utmost degree on anything that goes on out there.
Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, Representative Blackburn.
Would you be all right if we struck out Wyoming licensed veterinarian and just had veterinarian employed by the board? Is your hang up there Wyoming licensed veterinarian? So a dog vet can come out and do that? Is that your concern or?
Well, that might help, Mr. Chairman. Sorry. I don't really have a problem with any of that because but I just think that the brand inspector ought to be involved in any kind of determination as to whether an animal is being treated properly or not. And not to mention the fact that he probably knows who that livestock belongs to. So.
Okay. Yes, Representative Clausen.
Just to toss out an idea to solve this, if we go up into stricken language and unstrike an agent or officer of the board or person with authority to enforce this chapter, it might, and does that not do it? Maybe we go to our wordsmith here.
No.
Brand inspector is the agent of the board, right?
Yeah.
Mr. Chairman, so that language was put in there. It mirrors the language on the other side of the bill regarding pets and household animals. And so I think that they did that on purpose so that they have so that the two bills, a local peace officer could enforce either part of the bill. And so I don't know if you want to change that there. I'm sure there's a fix somewhere in there. I just, sitting here, I don't necessarily know what it is.
All right.
So, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, Representative Blackburn.
For Representative Crago, is a brand inspector, can they enforce chapter 63203? Are they authorized to do that?
I don't believe so. They're not, they would not be they're limited to enforcing livestock issues, they're not going to get into the pet side. They don't have the authority to do that. And that's where this definition, person with authority, delineates that out. Who can do what? And so they're not saying, so this part, we're only dealing with the livestock. Brand inspector would be included on this side. They would be able to do something on this side. A brand inspector would. But if we went to the first half of the bill and we're talking about pets, they would not be able to.
So we've actually, Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
Thank you. So we've actually put a pet statute over here. Is that what I'm seeing? 63203, where we said person with authority to enforce chapter, probable cause, and we've got that under livestock. Is that in the wrong place? And
no, so that goes with what we did in Senate File 26 earlier.
Okay.
And that goes along. This is fine. There's nothing wrong with this language. It works fine, works the way it's supposed to. If we're just trying to find a solution for Representative Winter's concern, we just need to figure out where to put brand inspector. The way I understand it, he would like, it would say as determined by a Wyoming licensed veterinarian and the local brand inspector, that they would have to get their blessing to impound an animal.
so it would have to be both.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, Representative Worf.
I thought that, and I don't want to speak for Representative Winters, but that's what I thought he was saying. He wants the brand inspector involved in the entire process. Once an animal has been impounded, he wants the brand inspector to be notified anytime an animal's been impounded, so that the brand inspector is there to help identify who owns the livestock in question and to ascertain whether or not like he said, the way this is written, it's so broad, and I understand it's written broadly so that anybody that's a peace officer can do that. But I think what I'm hearing is there's concern that not all veterinarians and not all peace officers know livestock. And I think that's what he's trying to say, is pull in the brand inspector Because that's the component that I see that's missing. The brand inspector knows livestock. And we're hoping that the peace officer and the veterinarian that's involved have some livestock background, but that's the question, or that's what I think the intent is of Representative. Am I correct?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, Representative Wharf, that's correct. I'm really concerned that this whole process is not beginning at the right point, I guess, or we're not involving the right people at the right time. There needs to be an investigation prior to any impoundment. And well, as far as livestock goes, you got to have somebody that understands livestock, number one, but also understand who is involved in this, and the brand inspector will probably know whose livestock it belongs to, and or what. So we just need to have this whole process from the beginning to involve the brand inspector or people who know livestock. And I really have a problem with when we crossed out peace officer, agent, or officer of the board, and then inserted person with authority, and that is so vague. I think we need to identify who is responsible there or who can do the best job.
Okay. Okay, go ahead, Representative Clausen.
I think I have a solution that addresses Representative Winter's concerns. So the language that we took out that was stricken, as determined by a Wyoming licensed veterinarian or veterinarian employed by the board, if we go as determined by a Wyoming licensed veterinarian and a Wyoming brand inspector or a veterinarian employed by the board. So that would mean a veterinarian and the brand inspector would have to agree there was a problem, or at least be notified. And I think that would take care of his concerns.
That would happen at impoundment, if I understand what you're saying, Representative Clausen. So in line 12, well, I'll just say, start in violation of this chapter may impound any livestock animal treated cruelly as determined by a Wyoming licensed veterinarian or brand inspector employed by the board. Then would that
Mr. Chairman, that's really necessary, I think. And I still have a problem with the first part where that was crossed out, the peace officer, agent, or officer of the board. I think that ought to be identified, but I mean, whatever you guys think.
Yeah, go ahead, Dan. Representative Larson, go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, I don't know. I'm just going to suggest something else, but I don't know if it would work. I'm wondering if we could put it up on top. Kind of. I was wondering, saying any person with authority in consultation with an agent or officer of the board may enforce this chapter. Is that? I'm looking at our legal advisor, maybe if something like that might work up higher.
Go ahead and go through that. Why we don't.
The only, I think that's fine conceptually. Just in practice, it might be difficult to always get an employee. I guess as long as the brand inspector was available, you could make that happen. If the brand inspector was not available, then you would not be able to impound the animal. That'd be the only issue, is whether or not, and that same thing with what Representative Winters is suggesting too, is from a law enforcement standpoint, you may not always be able to get somebody on scene soon enough to make that happen. That would be my only concern, is from the practicality side. From the conceptual side, I think that's a good idea. There's no reason we can't have them on board. It's just dealing with this, on the ground, and your local law enforcement trying to make something happen quickly. Oftentimes we don't have time. So.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I don't understand what this timing factor is. It doesn't seem to me that it's that big of an issue. I don't think we should have to do this just immediately. That's where an investigation is important before we do anything.
Yeah, so I've had trouble getting brand inspectors when I wanted them. But usually I think if you really need them badly, they start prioritizing.
Mr. Chairman,
Yeah, Representative Worf.
if I may, I just kind of scratched some words down here. I'm kind of going the same way that Representative Larson was, and maybe looking at putting a section above section A under 1129-114 impoundment of livestock animals. I would suggest something along the lines, prior to the impoundment of any livestock animal, the local brand inspector will be contacted to assist throughout the impoundment process. I think that's what he's trying to do, is at the onset, you need to have the brand inspector there to assist with making sure that we have the proper persons involved. You may have somebody that doesn't have enough understanding or background as far as livestock health, trying to make an assessment. And I think that's what he's trying to do, is pull it in, is if there's somebody that suspects you're abusing livestock before anything is impounded, maybe they should be pulling in the brand inspector to have the brand inspector help with that assessment. And then throughout that entire process, so that is, that they're part and parcel to all of this process, because it talks about all the other things that we go through and do. And I think that's the concern, is that we involve somebody that maybe knows a little bit more about livestock than somebody that's been defined as a person of authority.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, Representative Blackburn.
Because I don't understand about brand inspectors as much as you cattlemen do, will that brand inspector actually make the decision that an animal needs to be impounded? Will he make that decision?
I don't think that's the intent of the bill. I think we want the veterinarian. I really
If that's
think you
not
have
the-
to have the
If that's not
veterinarian
the
involved.
intent of the bill, then that verbiage doesn't work, I don't think.
But it's under the next section, Mr. Chairman, it says that. It says that it's the veterinarian that determines whether the animal has been treated cruelly. So I believe that the veterinarian is still the person that makes that determination. But the brand inspector is there to ensure that you got the right veterinarian there. Because there's all kinds of vets. There's veterinarians that specialize in small pets. There's veterinarians that specialize in the larger animals. And I think that's what and I hate to speak for Representative Winters, but that's what it seems like to me, is we want the brand inspector knows livestock. That's the whole purpose of pulling him in, is we're talking about specifically impounding livestock. And that's the strength of the brand inspector. I mean, it used to be that most of the guys that were in law enforcement grew up on ranches. They'd cowboyed at some point in time and they knew livestock, but that's no longer the case. A lot of our law enforcement guys that would be the people that we've defined as persons with authority, they don't have a ranching background. And I think that's the concern here, is that's one thing that we do know. The brand inspector has that connectivity to the livestock community.
Right.
And
that's the part we need to, and I'll agree with that part of it. I don't believe that the brand inspector has the ability to make the determination on the animal abuse. That part would be done by the veterinarian.
And Mr.
The
Chairman, it
relationship
still says that with the amendment that we have passed, where we put back in the stricken language on page 7, lines 13 through 15. That's still the licensed veterinarian that's making the determination of whether that animal's been treated cruelly.
Okay. Yes, Representative Larson.
Do we have an amendment on the floor?
No, we're discussing how to word craft an amendment in.
I would like to make an amendment.
All right, go ahead. Let's take a shot at it.
Okay, on page 7. 7, line 10, cross out 2.
Is your mic on?
Mr. Chairman, I'm sorry to interrupt, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Galloway is online and he emailed me and said that he thinks that he can help you with the wording.
Okay. Hang on just a second, Pete. Well, Representative Larson's going to take a stab at this and see if the committee likes the
It's
idea or
already
not.
on.
Go ahead, Dan.
Page 7, line 10, strike 2 in the middle there. And after authority, put a comma. And then insert in consultation with an agent or officer of the board, comma, may. And then the rest of the line goes on. So it would read, any person with authority, comma, in consultation with an agent or officer of the board may enforce this chapter. You'll say.
Are you good with that? Representative Winter, that will calm your concerns. Representative Wharf? Committee?
Second,
Oh, second.
second.
We have a second. Representative Blackburn. Any discussion on the amendment? And do you have that amendment down?
I have several here, so I just
Oh,
want
I
to make sure I
know.
have the right one at this point.
So,
So it would be person in authority, person with authority in consultation with an agent or officer. What's after officer?
Of the board.
Officer of the board. Of the board. May enforce the chapter and go on with that. Is that correct? Thank you.
okay. Representative Craigo.
Just maybe a friendly suggestion
Sure.
that you move that language to line 12 after the word may.
Okay.
Same language, same wording, but otherwise it's going to mess up the way the sentence flows. So it would just read, any person with authority to enforce this chapter or WS 63203 who has probable cause to believe that there has been a violation of this chapter may, comma, in consultation with an employee of the board, comma, impound any livestock animal treated cruelly.
Okay. All right. So would you like to amend? Would you like to amend it to
I
that?
would like to use his friendly amendment and give our second.
Good with that.
All right. So do you have that, Carol? We've just moved that language to line 12 after may in consultation with an agent or officer of the board.
Yes, I do. Thank you.
Impound, okay. Any discussion on it? John, Representative Winter.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd still like to hear what the person on the
Okay,
wants to say. So thank you.
didn't mean to exclude you, Pete. Now, go ahead and give us some input if you're okay with what change we're about to vote on. Okay. Are you on?
Mr. Chairman, I'm bringing him in.
Thank you, Carla.
Mr. Chairman, he's in the room with you,
Okay.
but he's not unmuted yet.
All right,
There you
There
go.
he is.
there we go.
We hear
Sorry
you.
about
Go
that,
ahead.
Mr. Chairman.
Go
I
ahead.
can't-
Pete.
I can't remember, Mr. Chairman, from statutes where the brand inspector, if he's a peace officer or he's just an agent of the board, but I think Representative Craigo probably put that in the right place. All you're trying to do is to get the brand inspector to make sure that he is involved from the get-go on impounding or taking possession of that particular animal. And I can't remember what a brand inspector under statute is. I think he's an agent of the board. And I'm not, he may be a peace officer too. That's something that maybe the county attorney remembers from statute, how a brand inspector is titled. But I think, I hate to see it gets messed up in this one paragraph. I think if you have an LSO attorney, I think they could work that out, or maybe the county attorney, Barry, can take care of that too. But I think it's in the right place, line 12. So thanks.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Holloway. So yeah, we've kind of plowed that ground. The brand inspector is a person of authority and a peace officer, and would be brought, this would be clear language. He'd be brought in pretty much at the beginning of impoundment. Question being called on the amendment. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, that amendment passes. Any other amendments? Question on the bill. Oh, I'm sorry. Hang on. We got a little more discussion. Go ahead, Representative Heiner.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would like to propose an amendment just for the sake of conversation on page 4, line 8. After owner, add in or is an emotional support animal. Sometimes some of these animals that go missing are emotional support animals. And I know of an individual in my hometown that he had PTSD and he lost his animal, and it was, fortunately, we as a community, we were able to get him another puppy to replace that animal. But I'm not sure if that's going to be more difficult to enforce or not.
Representative Clausen.
Mr. Chairman, so it wasn't in the animal abuse statutes, and it's not in the animal statutes, but we defined service animals a couple of years ago because there was abuses of people taking their pet and putting patches on them. And I think it's probably covered in that language, but I don't know where it is in statute. But I think we have that pretty well defined as to, because there were some abuses because everybody had an emotional support animal there for a while.
Okay. Well, the question I'd have is, wouldn't an emotional support animal be considered a pet? They would. And so I think they'd fit under this without adding that. Most of the time we've got, anyway, this is what I hear from attorneys, the fewer words, the better. And for many of us, that's not the case. But Representative Worf.
Yes, Mr. Chairman. Before we vote on the bill, I just have something I gotta say. I'm a no vote. I like the amendment.
Hang on till we get to that part on the. We're still. Yeah. Did anyone? Okay, is there a second on that amendment? Okay, so discussion on the bill before we vote. Go ahead, Representative Worf.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was tempted to bring in an amendment today that would remove all of the pet stuff from the bill, but I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to speak against it. I remain concerned. There's a couple problems with this whole process. I kept trying to figure out why I couldn't remember this sister bill we keep referring to, the Senate File 26. This committee didn't hear that bill. That was ran through the Judiciary Committee, and that's probably why it's not familiar to any of us. I didn't realize that till I went and looked at it. But that's one of the problems I have with this bill. I don't necessarily understand all this stuff that we changed in Senate File 26. It was passed by the House when we were doing all the Zoom meetings. It was a committee bill. But I still have pause with the fact that a person with authority can come in and seize animals, and the state can start assessing fees. They can obligate you to take it to the vet and have assessments. And I just don't think that's the way we should do things. I think there's clearly a problem with some of the centers that are having to take care of these pets for extended periods of time. They've incurred tremendous costs, but I think there's got to be a better way. And so I'm not going to belabor it. I am going to be a no vote just because I just have problems with, I think we're giving way too much authority for too broad of a class of enforcement. And it just grates me wrong, Mr. Chairman. So.
Okay, Representative Clausen.
Mr. Chairman, so I'll speak to some of these concerns. The Senate File 26 was an interim committee bill for the Ag Committee, and Chairman Hunt's here, but we worked on that in the interim. And then we ran it through judiciary because there's two portions to that. So the animal portions, the Ag Committee took care of, and then the legal parts of it, and Representative Grego worked on it a whole bunch, and he did a great job with it. So we had to run through the Judiciary Committee to get the legal parts right, because it was just a really touchy piece of statute. So it was a combination of both committees, and that was before you were on this committee. So as to your concerns, so almost everything you're concerned about, you can already do in law. This particular bill adds another process. So there's a hearing, and it actually adds protections for livestock people and for the pet people. The reason this was a separate statute or separate bill from House Bill 26 is House Bill 26 was all existing language that we reconformed into a more modern, useful set of statutes. This was a new portion. The impoundment or the bonding portion for the animals was in statute years ago. It was taken away, and it caused a big problem, and the animal shelters asked us to put it back in interim. So that portion was old statute. When it was removed, it created a problem from animals being held up too long. So hopefully that explains some of your concerns.
I'll add a little bit. So this is year 11 for me, and we were working on this 10 years ago. And every time there's a little bit of fear, this whole thing goes up in smoke. And what this does, it clears it up, is it gives us a clear process for the authorities to work off of. And it limits down the time so that you don't have animals impounded for however many tens of thousands of dollars they could run up and have run up. So that part really helps to clear up the statute, and this conforms. It just offers the protections that I'm certain after looking at the existing statutes, I don't have those protections with my livestock, and I don't believe pet owners do either. So I'm an aye vote on the bill. Question on the bill being called, roll call. Oh, hang on, we've got more conversation.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. I'll be an aye vote on committee here, but I'm not sure on the floor. I'm not real comfortable with the bill either.
Yeah, and I would encourage anyone that still has doubts on it to do some more research on their own. I think we've researched it as far as we can as a committee. I appreciate all your input. So we're ready for the vote. Carla, roll call.
Representative Blackburn.
Aye.
Vice Chair Clausen.
Aye.
Representative Fortner has submitted an aye vote or absentee vote. Representative Heiner.
Aye.
Representative Larson.
Aye.
Representative Western.
Aye.
Representative Worf.
No.
Representative Winter.
Aye.
Chairman Eklund.
Aye.
Would be 8 ayes, 1 no, do pass with amendments.
Okay, thank you, committee. So I suppose just a little informal discussion. When we leave absentee votes, I wasn't sure how that worked for sure. If you leave an absentee vote, it's as the bill is amended and is being voted on. So if you're not here and you've left an absentee vote and something is amended or changed, it really isn't your last chance, because it'll come up and hopefully come up on committee of the whole, and you'll have a chance to discuss your concerns there and fix it if you think it needs to be fixed. But just so you know, those are the rules on the amendment, or anything that's amended and voted on absentee. Okay, thank you, committee. We are adjourned.